Porsche Exchange, it's all about creating a legendary ownership experience that embodies our guest lifestyle. Our Porsche service team utilizes cutting-edge technology that delivers a transparent service visit and keeps us in constant contact with our guests. And I can't think of anyone more qualified to work on your Porsche, new or classic, than our Porsche certified technicians. Whether you're a longtime guest or new to our dealership, I welcome you to experience legendary at the Porsche Exchange. If you're a Porsche owner looking for reliable, convenient service without leaving the comfort of your home or office, look no further and take advantage of the Exchange at Home complimentary pickup and drop-off service exclusively at the Porsche Exchange in Highland Park.
The list of famous tracks we've been visiting continues to mount. Suzuka and Spa carry plenty of weight, but Interlagos has been the scene of amazing drama and racing history. Wheeling these GT4s around here will be a recipe for action as we get ready to watch the PCA Sim Racing Series 10 Challenge class live here on Podium Esports. I am Joe Peak, and with me in the booth tonight is Kenneth Bueno. Cameron Aubenon is on social media with Ryan Bauer producing, who's using cameras provided by Dougie Beard. But before we get to the racing, Series 10 is brought to you by the Porsche Exchange, which has been family owned and operated for over 40 years. Located on the North Shore of Chicago, the Porsche Exchange has grown to be the largest volume Porsche dealer in the entire Midwest. Along the way, they've won the Porsche Premier Dealership Award for many years in a row and has been chosen to be one of the few Porsche exclusive manufacturer dealerships in the entire country. Find out more at 4Porsche.com or follow them on Instagram at Porsche Exchange. Also, Six Sigma Sim Racing is proud to announce the Season 10 Clean Driver Award. One driver in each PCA Sim Racing class will win a Six Sigma Sim Racing $250 merchandise gift certificate. This goes to whoever earns the fewest incident points and license penalty points from their 6 best races this season. For more information, head to sixsigmasimracing.com. All right, last one we're going to be running here, Kenneth, at Interlagos, and it certainly has proved to be quite a challenge for some of the drivers.
It certainly has, and it's provided for some fantastic racing, though, Joe. No doubt about it here in Interlagos. Autodromo Jose Carlos Pace. We've seen two different sides of these races where it can really fan out at that second sector where things get really windy, and then we see things open up in the turn 1 area to Sena S, turn 3 to turn 4, Curva do Sol at the Descida do Galago. You see a lot of passing opportunities, a lot of draft involved, and we've seen a lot of good strategy in the mix as well. I remember being involved in one of the classes just about a week ago, and that was a lot of fun to see how different strategy was to see these drivers battle this track. It's been a lot of fun, and hopefully we see a last one that'll seal the deal in the right way here from Interlagos.
Absolutely. And, well, the championship right now is extremely close up at the top. 3 points between Arnie and Jonathan up there. Mark Doran, though, has been quick, so he could be a bit of a challenge. In fact, he's looking very good in qualifying as we speak, with David Palmer not that far of a jump behind either. Only 3 points between David and as well as James Legault for that 4th and 5th position. And then finally, you get a little bit of a drop-off down to 6th spot with Randy Lervold. So there you go. Top 5 all separated by a little less than 50 points there. So this is going to be fun throughout the season, the remainder of the season here. And before we get to the racing, we do want to remind you that PCA Sim Racing social media offers in-race reports, breaking news, and announcements through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. To subscribe, key in the platform name and add /PCA Sim Racing. Now, as I mentioned, Mark Doran right now looking pretty fast, and he's on the provisional pole. We've got about a minute left, so I'm checking to see if there is anybody that is able to complete a lap. And I think only Jack Stevenson, who, unless he's got something incredible in the last sector, I don't think will be able to overtake him. Might see Robert Benson get across in time. We'll see if he can make it there. He's got about 50 seconds left. So, yeah, that might be enough here on the run up the hill. But Stevenson, who sits in 19th, it looks like is not going to improve on this last lap, unfortunately.
And not going to be able to do so. And we see the limited field here, 21 cars tonight from Interlagos, and I saw a couple of weeks ago we had only 20 to make it at Spa for event number 4. So I mean, these fields rather consistent, and when you have that qualifying effort, or let's say if it gets wiped away by an off track, a lot of work you need to do to get to the front. But maybe we'll see that be easier than certain other tracks just because of the way the draft works. However, we'll see, and it looks like qualifying is about to end, Joe. Ready for the starting grid.
Yep, nobody else can set a lap from here, so it is locked in. Mark Doran is on your pole position with Scott Durham next to him. Then you've got Jonathan Reber starting in third. Casey McDonald will be P4, Alex Lidback in fifth, and Arnie Clayson, our points leader, all the way down in sixth here. Will that be a problem? David Palmer starts seventh. Then it's Robert Goulet in the eighth position. Andrew Smiley, P9, and the top 10 is rounded out by Tom Crane.
Randy Lervold in the number 614, who finished in P6, or actually is P6 in the standings right now, is P11 on qualifying. Lisa Eskridge behind him in P12. Stacey Iwata in the number 5 will roll off from the 13th, and then 14th will go to the driver we just talked about not too long ago, the 71 of Robert Benson. Aubrey Iyer in the number 10 machine rolls off from 15th. Andy McCune in the number 525 will be P16 when we drop the green. 17th will go to the number 7 of Jeremy Main. 18th to Johan 9, the 141. Jack Stevenson with a 143.7 to put him 19th on the grid. Chris Schuessler and Art Schwartz in the 82 will round out our 21 car field from Interlagos.
And if you tuned in last night, you saw a bit of a problem down into the Senna S when they went 4 wide into there. We're crossing fingers that we don't get the same thing. I am almost certain, Kenneth, that the stewards, the race controls probably talked to the drivers and reminded them about what happened and said, don't do that.
Don't fit as many cars as possible. Trust me, it will not work when that corner tightens up in turn 1. But it's just a testament, Joe, to the passes that you can make going into that first corner, not only on the opening jump, but throughout the laps as the race progresses. You're going to see a lot of that where drivers will get big runs off the draft of another and then dive for the inside, or in some cases the outside for the Senna S and turn 1. So hopefully we don't see 4 or 5 wide pack up into a parking lot like we did, but we're probably going to see some drivers try their luck and go for it.
Indeed. So down into the Ducks Bill here, being led by the pace car. Doran's going to take control of them once they get up to that pit entry. And pretty similar temperatures to what we had been seeing in the past 2 weeks here. It's 86 Fahrenheit on the track surface, so should be pretty grippy out there and not too hot. But drivers have talked frequently about needing to manage the tires over the course of these 2 weeks, so expect a few to take 1, maybe 2 tires in the pit stop itself, just to try and get a little bit extra grip, even if the car is going to act a little funny after that, so that they can find some speed here at the end of the race. And we've got 2 races tonight. Let's not forget the 15-minute sprint, what we're about to see here, and then the finishing order will determine the 40-minute feature that they'll have after this. So you definitely want to have a good race here to kick things off, which is going to happen momentarily, because there goes the pace car peeling in. Doran waiting for the signal from the flag stand. Up at the top, green flag is out, and as they start to accelerate away, we got a couple drivers thinking 3 wide down into the first corner. Somebody there on the third row just blasting forward, and in fact braking extremely late, but it looks like we're going to be able to sort it out as we hit the first apex of the Senna S, and it's looking nice and collected to me.
That looks really clean so far. A couple of drivers made some contact, but it looks like everyone keeps it straight. We're going to stay green, and things are going to be all good for now through the first 2 corners. A really good start, by the way, Joe, by Mark Doran in the 486. Had that inside lane for turn 1, immediately jumped to the 4 of Scott Durham. And Jonathan Reber ending up in second now, a little bit loose off of the corner. Looks like here comes Durham with a challenge for that position heading into the right-hander. Going to switch to the other side, and side-by-side for second. Durham will back out, and probably some of what we're going to expect to see for the rest of the night, Joe. Maybe in the feature race more than this heat race, but a lot of drivers backing out in certain corners and then trying to set up the next. And Durham looks like not in range for Reber, and all single file throughout most of the field.
And the one that made up the most positions there at the start was David Palmer. He was the one I was mentioning that just blasted up through the order, gained 3 just in this first half lap already as they come through the Ducksbill once again. Doran keeping himself out of range at about a second ahead of Jonathan Reber, so that's the good news for him. We've had, I think, our first relatively big incident. Stacy Iwata gets turned at the Ducksbill, and Lisa Eskridge seems to be one of the victims.
It looks like the car that got into Stacy was the green and black machine of Aubrey Iyer. We got into him. There was almost about 3 wide action around where Robert Benson was. There was just that slight little contact into the corner that sent Stacy Iwata around. Looks like Iwata's really going to drop off 21st and still trying to pick up the pace and really far off from Jack Stevenson, about 9.5 seconds back. That can easily happen, and especially, Joe, with a minimal field, we have only 21 cars. You're probably going to have that happen if you make a deer mistake. Obviously, there's not going to be a saving grace for you. No caution to come out, so you really have to pick yourself up on your own. And as Mark Doran continues to lead this field, nice battle around the edge of the top 10. Looks like Randy Lurvold, Alex Lidback rather close as Scott Durham continues to reel in Jonathan Reber.
Yep, Jonathan Reber holding on to that P2, and Durham wants to try and take that back, as there's one of those fights you were talking about. Aubrey Iyer with a battle with the yellow number 7 of Jeremy Main down there for 13th position. Main comes out ahead, but we were taking a peek at this man a little bit earlier. Arnie Clayson, there goes a wide move from Casey McDonald out of SA, but looks like he will not lose the spot. Clayson needs to try and push forward a little bit. He really can't afford to lose too many points to those ahead of him, and he's trying. He took a little poke there down in Pico de Pato.
Yeah, tried his best, unfortunately, and not going to be the winning move at that point. And Klassen finished in P3, or right now P3 finished P3 in that race, and so far the leader in the standings. And Jonathan Reber might have that head start for now with this 242 kind of struggling in these first 15 minutes or so. We'll see if that trend continues for now like it has in the first 2 laps, but we'll really have the big run coming off for the final corner, and that's going to be a really big place here, Joe, to pass the Interlagos, and we've already seen it implemented many times before. You can get a really big run out of Runcao, go to Subida dos Boxes, as Klassen dives way in on McDonald. McDonald shut the door, and that could have been disastrous for both drivers. Luckily, they both escaped.
Duly noted, the 242 is strong on the brakes into the first turn. He's very lucky he did not turn Casey there. He touched him right at the apex. Also, Aubrey Iyer, who made that contact with Stacy Iwata, has been given a black flag, and Aubrey is now in pit lane serving that penalty.
Tough break for Iyer. They're going to lose spots to both Stacy Iwata and Lisa Eskridge. We saw Iwata go around at Pico de Pato, and then Lisa Eskridge went off track by the Lonesome, so Lisa fell back significantly, now back to 20th, but Iyer now going to be on the back foot as we continue to watch what's probably building up, Joe, to be a somewhat 3-car battle, if you include Jonathan Reber, who's slightly pulling away. Scott Durham now being reeled in by David Palmer in the 43, and you mentioned him, Joe, as the biggest mover on the opening start, up 3 positions and might just be up 4, slowly catching up to that 4-car.
Keeping them honest here. There is David Palmer in the Haribo machine, trying to keep up after gaining those spots so early. Can he continue to try and charge forward, or was that the halt of his progress? Also, I just saw Jack Stevenson got a penalty. Not sure what that was involved with, but the 43 a little too far back for the slipstream to have much of an effect this time, and not close enough there for those in front of him between Durham and Reber, so they're going to stay in position. But it looks like they might have lap traffic because Iyer is just now coming out of pit lane.
It's going to be really interesting for the drivers. Here's a look at the entire track map and where they're going to have to deal with things, but it just looks like at this point Iyer might just fall a lap down. Indeed, Iyer does, and that's going to be kind of a wrench in some scenarios, but it might also be a help for some just with the fact that they can get some draft off of the lap car there, much like David Palmer can do. As here's the pass, Scott Durham, Jonathan Reber, both of them tussling for second, and Durham's got the spot. Now eyes dead set, 1.1 seconds ahead to Mark Durham. Scott Durham right now with a really good start and was the winner last time we had this challenge series at Spa. So we'll see what happens. Really good jump here from Durham.
Yeah, and Durham is a bit far down in the points because he missed the first 2 races, let's not forget, but clearly fast with him taking the win last time out and is looking good here as Aubrey Ayer has a replay, and it's just the incident coming up into the Ducksbill. Notices Essay, and unfortunately coming together with David Palmer and undoing his hard work.
Yeah, Palmer up so many positions, trying to catch up to the leaders, and that's why I talked about it could be a good thing for some. If a lap car's in front, they can gather some draft, but it could be a poor thing in a situation like that, where Palmer just tried to get around on the inside towards Esse, and it just looked like Ayer shut the door. And that was a big problem there for Palmer, who's really going to lose out and does have some damage as well. Here's where the 43 is trying to pick up in P13. So a really tough scenario for Palmer as we watch your top 3 continue to put it on the field. They have really pulled away from now 4th place Casey McDonald, who's under fire from the points leader, Arne Klassen, in the 242.
All right, he's up to 5th after that incident that he slid through with a lapped car, getting into Palmer. And he's chasing on McDonald. McDonald doesn't defend. He's going to leave the door open. The 242 tries to get inside, and he's not able to do it once again. Man, credit to Casey McDonald. Nerves of steel, twice now shutting the door very late on his rival.
Really, really defensive, but it's also a case of Joe not wanting to go off on these turns here at Interlagos, and in some places you do have a lot of runoff, like right here in the Pico de Pato, where you can really get a lot of space if things go awry. But for the most part, you know, you have off tracks that will affect you if you end up in a certain part. Mind you, that was Esse, not Pico de Pato. Now it's going to be Pico de Pato where they come in, similar looking corners, but nonetheless, I mean, it's been pretty fun to watch McDonald play this defensive stance against Klassen. And although that 242 is trying, although he's faster for right now, McDonald says no way. And as long as he can fend him off for those corners, it seems as though Klassen just has no response for it.
None yet, but this race is not the only one. Let's not forget, yes, it's going to be over fast, and it'll determine your starting position, so it'll essentially carry on if they stay as is until the checkered flag and find themselves in the same spot at the start of the next race. Just kind of reset a little bit, and all the gaps will be crunched back together. No charge this time from Arne as we come back to Andrew Smiley in the meantime. Another driver seems very good on the binders, catching up to Randy Lervold for that P7.
And Smiley came home inside the top 10 at Spa a couple of weeks back, as there's a look from the rear end of the 614, Randy Lervold, who did finish inside the top 12, finished in 12th at that Spa race and had the points mixed in from race 1 and race 2. But look at the draft here by Smiley, hopping on the brakes. Unfortunately, not enough to get to the inside, and this is really what we're going to see over the course of the feature race. So we're seeing just a taste of it in the first 15 minutes of this heat race, Joe, where the field really separates. We have differences in pace from different classes in the field, and then you'll see 2-car breakaways, 3-car trains, maybe sometimes 4, depending on the battles, but most of what we're going to see are these 2-car trains. Lervold and Smiley, where they're kind of just in their own company. They get to race each other for a while, and all the while, they're just letting Mark Durham run away. It was opening things up to 2.7 seconds on Scott Durham.
Yeah, it's looking like this is falling right into the lap of Mark, this race, with Durham and Reber fighting as much as they have been. Just kind of scampered off and put himself out of range unless one of them has something incredible in these last couple laps, which it's not looking likely. Still a mistake could be made, so all he has to do is just bring this one home and try to stay safe for these sprint points. Of course, the majority of the points going to be awarded for that feature, so that's the one you really need to be concerned about and try to take that win in his hopes of catching up to Arne in that points lead. Speaking of him, there he goes by our screen, coming down through the Senna S once again, and it looks like he has dropped slightly off of McDonald.
Yeah, not really as close to that 16 as probably Klassen would hope. But I mean, after a couple of times where McDonald shut the door, you know, you figure that the tires on Klassen's machine probably are just a little bit overworn and overheated, just with the fact that he was trying so hard to get by McDonald, and it was all for naught. So Klassen just kind of let off the gas and might just lay in the bed that he's made for now with about 3 minutes and 55 seconds left. You can still have a chance to fight against that spot for P4, but if you're running well where you are right now and you can't get by McDonald, top 5 isn't necessarily a bad deal, although you're looking at guys like Mark Duran and Jonathan Reber, who are a couple of spots ahead of you, might gain some points. But for Klassen, we'll see what that 242 can do, although they're kind of bringing in Alex Lid back in the 11, so there might just be a double-edged sword in this case.
Yeah, and that could be trouble if they find a third car getting involved. As, let's see, Doran going to be crossing the line with about almost exactly 3 minutes. So I think this is going to be 2 to go at the line this time. It might be close, though. No, it should be 2 to go. Yeah, so they're just about at 3 minutes here just now. And Durham behind him at 2.2 seconds back. He will absolutely need a mistake at this stage from that 486 if he has any sights on trying to take the sprint win.
Yeah, that's true. But one thing also to note is that Mark Duran just kind of let off a little bit. 141 flat for that 486. Durham is still gunning at a 140.8, so that gap kind of closed in a little bit, although I think Duran has put in the gas back in and really has opened up that lead. Still 2.4 seconds, and Durham with no chance for right now. So it might be just a little lapse in judgment where Duran was just hanging back, but now in this last lap, going to try and push as Andrew Smiley will look on forward to Randy Lurvold. We've seen these two close together. They haven't really fought all too much, but diving on to the brakes at 167 will close in quite a bit. I think that's a really good corner. Adam Smiley will get the draft off of Lurvold's machine. We'll see if the Connecticut Valley region driver can do something for P7.
That 614 certainly has a mirror full of Smiley right now. Just has to stay calm. Oh, but that's not going to do it as he goes wide out of Horseshoe, and that almost opens the door, but Andrew can't step through quite yet. He's going to have to be a little closer than that.
And he kind of misjudged that corner as well. Lurvold went a little bit wide, missed the apex, and that's a really high momentum corner where you're hopping on the brakes, but you really have to keep that momentum wound up throughout that entire sector, and Lurvold just fell short. Smiley had that chance, but did not go for it. I think this is going to be a really good sector heading for Juncao, and then, of course, the Subida dos Boxes, that final straight as Mark Duran will potentially here, Joe, look for the white flag, and there's Aubrey Iyer, lap car in front of him.
It was indeed the white flag for Doran, so 1 to go. He does have that lap traffic in front of him. Hopefully shouldn't cause any issues. Arnie Clayson going for a last lap pass, but still nothing doing as Casey McDonald has successfully held him back pretty much since the start of the race. This has been a fantastic drive from that number 16 machine, but we head back now to Doran as he weaves it down out of the Descida del Lago towards Horseshoe once more. Not even sure if he's going to catch Aubrey before this is over.
I don't even think he wants to either, Joe. Doesn't want any potential problems of going side by side with Iyer. You can just hang back, let that gap simmer where it's at, and still hold the Ford down at 2.5 seconds. And he's already in the last sector. He's already through Esse, going to look for Pinheirino and then Bico de Pato. He knows he can see the checkered flag in sight rather soon, so he doesn't even need to get by Iyer. No business needed to be done with the lap car. He could just hold where he's at and should be the 15-minute sprint win.
Now he's starting to catch up a little bit more. This seems to be a strong part of the track for Mark. That or a weak one for Aubrey. Either way, they've come together. And as they exit off of the junction, looks like Aubrey's going to get a decent enough run that maybe Iyer will be able to finish all the laps. Well, not all of them. Actually, the number 10's already a lap down, unfortunately. So all but one, I guess I should say, if Aubrey decides to continue. Mark Doran, in the meantime, going to take the sprint win here for the challenge class at Interlagos. Behind him, Scott Durham is P2, and Jonathan Reber will round out your podium. It's quite a gap back down to Casey McDonald, who will be able to hold on to that fourth despite Arnie threatening him the whole way.
Yeah, really good display of defense by McDonald. And if you're classing here in the 242, you have to take note of this. Struggle to get by in the first 15 minutes. You don't want to have that same problem occur to you by the time you get to that 40-minute feature race, because again, that lead of the championship is at stake. Jonathan Reber finished in the podium. You get those couple of points ahead of Klassen, and in the 40-minute feature, Klassen will really need to dial things up, or we might just have a shift in the points lead as here comes the last couple of drivers that are heading through to the start-finish line, as we do have some more left. David Palmer, Lisa Eskridge, those that are coming off the final corner.
Yep, Eskridge going to be the last one on the lead lap. Got caught up in those early incidents out of the duck spill, and that unfortunately put her on the back foot. But she will restart in 18th and will complete all the laps at least. So there's a psychological boost. Let's see what the future will hold when we head off to that in just a moment. Quite a few black flags, I have to admit, in that session. Hopefully we'll have fewer, but Mark Doran was your victor with Scott Durham in second and Jonathan Reber finishing in third. Then it's Casey McDonald, P4. Artie Clayson was fifth, followed by Alex Lidback in the sixth position. Randy Lervold up 4 to get a P7. Andrew Smiley was 8th, and then Robert Goulet 9th. Tom Crane finished exactly where he started in 10th.
P11 will go to Robert Benson, who started 14th, and that's where he finishes. It'll be 12th place for Jeremy Main, who rolled off 17th, one of 3 drivers who we'll talk about later that also gained 5 spots in this feature race. The 18th place starter, Johan Nye, comes home 13th at the end of the 15-minute sprint. 14th place for Andy McCune. Top 15 for Stacy Iwata, despite the early issue at around lap 1 or lap 2. Art Schwartz comes from the back of the field to go to 16th at the end of the 15 minutes. It'll be 17th place for David Palmer, who got into contact with Aubrey Iyer and unfortunately could not pick things up. 18th for Lisa Eskridge and 19th for Chris Schuessler, who's the last driver on the lead lap. And Jack Stevenson, Aubrey Iyer, the 2 ones that are 1 lap down, 20th and 21st. And
we have just a little bit of a delayed start here for the warm-up. Chris Schuessler, who was 19th, wound up actually, I think, being the last one on the lead lap in the end because he pulled out of the pits after he served a penalty, I believe. So looks like that is finally going to send us off into the warm-up now that they are done with that. And this won't really mean a whole lot, just maybe a bit more practice if the drivers feel like they need it. But yeah, like I was saying there, Kenny, I was a little bit surprised at how many black flags we saw in the sprint. I think it looks like about 5 of them over the course of that, which is unusually high for this group.
Yeah, very high, and I wasn't expecting it either. I would expect maybe 1, maybe 2, just in case, but that's usually over the entire stretch, 15-minute and 40-minute feature combined. You don't really see that all too much in the first 15 minutes. Hopefully, things don't get that much more intense penalty-wise once we get to that feature, but we did see a couple of drivers get some contact and some pretty bad scenarios for some of them, where some of them went around or went off track and had damage as a result. So yeah, Joe, pretty interesting that we saw as many penalties as we did, but hopefully we don't see as many throughout the 40-minute feature that's upcoming.
Indeed. So we wait for the clock to tick down, and they will be gridding up. It's another rolling start, pretty much the same thing all over again, except obviously with it being longer, we also will have pit stops. So we'll see if anybody tries to save a little bit of fuel on this one, trying to hang in the slipstream of one of their rivals, or like we said, what's going to happen in the pit stops with tires. In the other series, they have a little bit longer stop for fuel, so they've done 1 or 2. I can't imagine they'll be able to do 2, and it might just be a single one that they'll be able to put onto the car here today without adding too much time to it. But we'll wait and see in the end. I'm sure some of the drivers have tried a few things in the practice sessions over the course of the week to try and figure out how they want to play this.
Oh yeah, that's for certain. And from what I saw in one of the classes about a week ago, just saw the difference in drivers who were at the back who made really early undercuts, and then those who just stayed all the way at the end and had that overcut. And for the undercut, it seemed to pretty much work at a track like this, given the distance and how far drivers are and just the speed, the way this track drives. The undercut seemed to work. So maybe some people will try those undercut strategies if they have trouble early in the feature, but I mean, we're seeing a lot of experimentation, a lot of drivers doing different things, but I mean, we'll just have to see. We're probably looking at pit stops, Joe, at around maybe the 20-minute mark. Should be around halfway, and it probably won't be that big of a problem for many unless they make a huge mistake going on a pit road or hit that tire barrel at the entrance of it on that long straightaway. Who knows?
Yeah, well, hopefully nobody has some sort of drama like that, although I have seen it happen before. So you can just never count anything out. There's all kinds of weird things that tend to happen, even in sim racing, and I've seen some wild ones over the years. But getting beautiful views here from Dougie's cameras, presented by Ryan, as we wait for them to wrap up. One of the unique things about this track, we got some sights of it that iRacing actually did build, is that it's literally in the middle of a neighborhood. There's houses on the other sides. Yeah, those are apartment buildings there next to this track, which is just wild for me to think about.
Well, first of all, I can imagine the rent is high as it can be. That's a beautiful view of the racetrack. If you're on those top floors, you can see everything. It kind of reminds me of Nashville Fairgrounds, that it's kind of in the middle of just homes and a bunch of families and people who live there who just happen to have a racetrack right there nearby. So pretty cool that the Sao Paulo Brazilians are able to have Interlagos that close to them in the middle of a neighborhood. It's pretty interesting to see.
Absolutely. So 1 minute left to go. A few drivers have popped out and have been trying to get a few more laps in out there, but otherwise I'm seeing the majority of them just kind of sitting and waiting, resting a bit before they get the adrenaline pumping once again here down in South America. This is actually the only track in South America that iRacing has currently. Hopefully we'll get a few more someday down the line. I haven't heard any rumblings of any being added on the list, but there's definitely other tracks throughout the world that are on their way that they have said are coming pretty soon. So it's always like Christmas time when it gets to be around time for the iRacing build. You're wondering what cool new content and toys you'll get to play with. And here we go, 10 seconds left. The drivers get to play with these Caymans here for another 40 minutes for the last race of these 2 weeks here at Interlagos and the PCA Series 10. This historic 10 seasons that they have run for this wonderful series. Looks like we are at 0. So our starting order, in case you missed it a little bit earlier, is still Mark Doran on the pole position, Scott Durham next to him. Jonathan Reber will start from 3rd, and Casey McDonald makes up the gap that was lost in that last race, starting from 4th. Alex Lidback in 6th. In 5th is Arnie Clayson, Alex Lidback in 6th, and Randy Lervold in P7. And it's Andrew Smiley in 8th, Robert Goulet in 9th, and Tom Crane in 10th.
Robert Benson will look to break into the top 10 in the feature race. He'll start 11th. 12th will go to Jeremy Main in the number 7 machine. Johan Nye in the number 141 will roll off from 13th. 14th is where you'll find the 525 of Andy McCune. Stacey Iwata will round out the top 15. Then goes Art Schwartz in P16. 17th to David Palmer. 18th to Lisa Eskridge. Chris Schuessler and Jack Stevenson will round out your top 20. And Aubrey Iyer, who struggled in that 15-minute sprint race, will look for some redemption. Shotgun at the field, 21st.
Right, already on their way on the short pace lap here. So Kenny, if you're in Scott Durham's shoes, what do you do on this one to change the outcome? Last time you lost out to Doran. You didn't have the pace to catch back up to him. You lost second position briefly. So how do you tackle this one?
You have to be aggressive early, and after those 15 minutes, what I really did learn is that the moves that were made that decided the race for the most part were decided very early, around lap 1, lap 2, lap 3. So if you're Scott Durham, make this move now. Don't be as hesitant in a turn run as you would be, let's say, earlier in the night. You learned a little bit. You know the details of how to drive this car fast. You know that you can catch up to Doran at least and keep pace with him. So try to be aggressive early. Make those dives. Make those moves. You know you can. These are two very clean drivers, so it can be done. And Durham is going to have to strike first with no mercy, kind of like Cobra Kai. But Scott Durham, ready for the green flag in the feature.
All right, well, we'll see who's got the martial arts here, the skills to try and punch their way up to the front as they slowly approach the pit entry. And same as last time, Doran will have the chance to be the first to go once that signal is given. And boy, they are right. Look at him. He's right up next to him, making sure he's as far to the wall as he can go. And there is the green flag. Oh, it's a horrible start for Duran. And Reber is actually going to be able to come up the inside. Can he take this spot away? He's up to the lead by the time they get to the braking zone. But Durham is going to fight him around the outside. Can he get it? Yes, he's got it back. And it looks like Reber might also lose out to Mark Doran, who gets at least back up to P2. But an atrocious start for the 486.
Oh, Mark Doran got absolutely jumped, Joe Peak, on that opening jump, heading for the center. S was caught 3 wide in the middle, and we almost had some contact that could have sent Doran out of this race. Look at Jonathan Reber, hard on the brakes into Descida del Lago. Crossover by Doran. We're side by side for second.
A little bit of blinking, unfortunately, for Reber. He's still got the inside here coming into the horseshoe. If he breaks deep, he could win this fight, as Doran's going to try and fight as hard as he can. No, some way around the outside. He manages to stay ahead. It's another right-hander into SA, so the fight isn't completely over. But as it switches back now into Pinarino, he's got that second place. Never say die.
And here comes Reber back for the fight into Bico de Pato, and that was a huge commit by Doran on the outside into Laranjina. But look at Casey McDonald, who was fighting with Arnie Klassen, the points leader in that 15-minute sprint race, now with the eye set into the podium position. And this is exactly what I had mentioned before we went green in the feature, Joe. Scott Durham needed to be aggressive in the opening laps. He was. Doran had a poor start. Durham took advantage of it, and now look where he stands, about 3 seconds ahead of the rest of the competition. Really good stuff.
Wow, big gap here for the first lap being completed. 3 seconds between the number 4 and the 486. And Doran's not out of the woods because Reber is still hot on his heels and, in fact, taking a big look down into the Senna S, just not close enough to do something realistic. In fact, he overshot the turn a little bit.
And he's going to open the door here for Casey McDonald, who's going to grab a bit of the draft. And a really dangerous part, if you mess up the Senna S, you can easily get overtaken heading for Breta Oposta and Descida del Lago. And it looks like Casey McDonald, a peak on the inside. We're going to back out and almost clip the grass there on the straightaway. We'll not dive on the brakes to the bottom to go for the pass, and we'll just try and set it up next time by. But it's opening things up, Joe, for somewhat of a 4 to 5 car train. This is tailed now by Alex Lidback, but even not too further behind is Randy Lorvold, leading a group of Andrew Smiley and a couple of others. So our closest battles that we've seen, and closest groups, clusters of maybe 4 or 5 cars, the most that we've seen all night long.
Had an incident between Palmer and Schuessler, it seems, down into the Descida del Lago, sent Schuessler flying off the course. And from what I can see of it, I can say that things don't look good for Palmer, I'm afraid. But we'll see. Maybe the stewards will have a different view on it as we continue to follow this battle for second place. Is it becoming a little bit more of a fight for third, though? Because it seems like Reber is dropping off quite a bit.
Yeah, Reber seems to be letting off, but maybe it's just an attempt here, Joe, to save the stuff, not be oversteppy and not wear out those tires to the point where later in the run he's going to have absolutely no shot at Doran. You want to save your tires if if things did not work in the opening 1 or 2 laps. But here's a big run by Arnie Klassen, the 242. And this is, by the way, Joe, the battle for the points lead. This is a 3-point spread between these two going into tonight's race after Spa in race number 4. So really good stuff on the line between the 16 and the 242. And Klassen not able to make that move happen out of Senna S. A bit of a mistake, and around Klassen goes in front of Alex Lidback. A huge mistake by your points leader.
Let's not forget as well that there's already been a bit of a point swing since Arnie was not able to beat him on track last time. And here's the replay. Just hit that curb after he went off and bounced him up. Thankfully, did not fall into the way of any of the oncoming traffic, so he was able to back out of it and get going without further damage. But there's a view from Lidback. It says, oh, thank you, I'll have that.
Yeah, that could not have been anything but a proud brown pants moment. You're seeing the driver go sideways in front of you, and while it is an easy pass, and you notice how easy it is as soon as it happens, you're just like, oh boy, the last thing I would want is for a driver to just swipe my nose in front of me, and I end up in a crash that I do not want to be in so early on in the feature. We also did see Aubrey Iyer catch a problem in the same place, Joe. Turns 1 and 2 around that Senna S. Iyer had hit the inside guardrail, is now falling back to 20th. As here's a look on board from the Riverside region driver, Casey McDonald, and does have a head of steam here on Jonathan Reber for third.
So from what I could tell on those point scoring, that fourth and fifth place finish between them put a single point between them coming into this race. So now McDonald absolutely is the points leader. Doesn't take a genius to figure out the math on that one. It's more of a question of by how much. As we watch David Palmer's perspective, haven't seen any sort of penalty for him or Schuessler quite yet. Palmer now working to try and get into 14th past Andy McCune. Is he going to try and dive down to the inside? Hasn't shown his nose quite yet. There it is as he outbreaks him into the corner by a wide margin. Can he make the apex? Yes, he does.
Textbook move by Palmer. So far, Joe, our biggest mover, if not one of the biggest movers that we've seen in the feature race. So we saw Palmer, how quick he was in the 15-minute sprint before ending up in an issue with Aubrey Iyer. This seems to be a little more of a payback race, saying, hey, I've got a lot of speed. Let me show it out to the rest of the field. I know that I can make passes. I know that I can hang. But those guys at the front, still a lot of boxes needed to be checked. Johan Nye is next in the 141. And we had a little bit of a peek of that battle for P3. Casey McDonald still looking at Reber, but on board with Palmer and a really good look into this portion of the course. And this appears to be heading into Ese from La Ranjina.
Oh, sounds like my instincts were right. Palmer just got the black flag, so that's going to set him backwards once again. Now, he can take that when he takes his pit stop if he wants to pit a little bit early here, but it will still apply an extra hold time for him. As here is Scott Durham, no longer 3 seconds ahead. I will say, Doran's trying to reel him in. Last lap for Scott was a 41.4. Doran was a 40.6. Let's see what it is as they just crossed the line now. 41.5, still slightly slower for Scott. Mark, a 41.1, another 4/10 quicker.
I mean, that last lap by was almost insane, the gap that they had in lap time. It was almost 0.8 of a second between those two. Now it is severely closed in. But what I want to know is that, are we going to see the same phenomenon that we ended up seeing in that first 15-minute sprint, where the second place car could get within maybe 2 seconds flat, but then that first place car would just stay where they at, or maybe even just grow the gap back to 2.2, 2.3, 2.4 seconds, and this time it's stagnating at around 2.5. So who knows what might happen, or if Doran has anything in the tank in raw pace, or whether he's going to have to look for a strategy in order to get around. Remember these two, Joe? Randy Lervold, Andrew Smiley, those two who are battling for position in the 15-minute sprint race? Well, now they find themselves in the same spot, going at it for P6.
A very unusual line for Lervold. I think we saw him do that before, and this time, unfortunately, it's going to cost him a position as Smiley sneaks into the inside of turn 8, and that puts him into P6. Next up the road, Lidback, but he's got to make up about 4 seconds to catch him.
And again, going back to the notion that I pointed out, Joe, about attacking early, that's where you're going to get a lot of your positions, because right now, as of lap 5, only 5 laps in here at Interlagos, the field is pretty much separated for the most part. You do have some clusters here and there, but that situation with Smiley and Lidback, that probably would have been severely cut down if it was lap 1 or lap 2. Here's Arnie Klassen looking on the inside of Art Schwartz. Remember, Klassen is still rebounding from that spin at the Senna S turn 2, and so that'll move the 242 up to 17th.
Yeah, he needs a much better result than this. He can't afford to have this eat into his points lead at all. And in fact, he won't have the points lead after this as it stands right now. Back up to the front of the field as they fly onto the Retta Aposta. Looks like Doran is indeed running away from Reber and McDonald, who were fighting so hard earlier, but they're also dropping Lidback by some margin. So they're relatively safe. Maybe this is just the part of the race where they kind of settle into their pace and let the race come to them. Casey doesn't need this spot right away, and if he feels like he can do something a little bit later, why not save the tires a little?
Yeah, just a different mindset from the sprint race, where you have a little bit of time to do a lot of work. Now you have way more time to do the work that you need to do to close things off and have a good points day, or maybe even a win heading into the next event for this challenge class. So yeah, you're definitely right. They're letting the race come to them. They're kind of moving in with the ebbs and flows of this race. They're not really trying to reach their hand out the window and do anything crazy. They're just hanging in where they're at, and if things go well, then they go well. If they don't go well, oh well. They've got a pit stop. They can recover and they can adjust as they may need to be for the rest of the race. So that's going to be the news for Reber, Doron, Durham, and Casey McDonald, all those top 4 that are running away. Here's a nice battle between Robert Benson, Stacy Iwata. Remember, Joe, we saw that battle pretty much close down. Iwata ended up in a spin, the opening laps of the sprint race, and now closing in for P11.
Yep, in the first one, he wadded it up, and this time he didn't. So Stacy is still in the mid-pack. Oh, back to Randy Lervold. And now it's Tom Crane that he's having to be concerned with. Tom trying to round the outside into the Senna S, but he doesn't quite have the track position. He's going to have to back out of it. That loses them a little bit to Robert Goulet, who is starting to approach and make it into 3-car battle.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun once these 3s start to close in together. And Robert Gallus is looking for a better race tonight from Interlagos. Unfortunately struggled and came home 17th at the end of the Spa race. So Gallus in the 809 is certainly looking for some better luck in that polka dot yellow. Porsche Cayman GT4, which is, Joe, one of the brightest cars and one of the more unusual paint scheme wise, but it is easily noticeable whenever you see it. I think it kind of reminds me of the Duncan car that I saw a couple of weeks back at VIR, but Robert Gallus's car, unmistakable, and now looking for Tom Crane to really close in.
I got to give credit to drivers that make sure that you don't forget their car, and that definitely does the job here, does Robert Goulet's polka dot paint scheme. Meanwhile, in front of him, though, Crane's not looking at that car in the mirrors. He's looking at Lervold in front of him. Just can't seem to get a good enough exit at the time that he needs it.
And Gallus, I'll say, is a spotter's daydream, not a spotter's nightmare. As Tom Crane, yeah, this is going to be a really interesting situation, Joe, for Tom Crane in the 864, because he had the speed, almost launched in on a pass for Lervold, but just backed out of it and couldn't find the momentum. Now, as Gallus is starting to grab in the draft, now within 5/10 of a second, so maybe even now 4/10 of a second, as they get closer to Senna S turn 1, Crane is going to be in a situation where he may have to play offense and defense at the same time, and that's really tough, where you're trying to have your mind split 2 different ways between holding off the driver behind you and then attacking on the one in front of you. And in some cases, they could just chokehold drivers, and they may fall both of those spots where they just kind of fold in that case. It looks like for Crane, that was a really good Senna S, so that'll pull him away from Gallus for now and might have him on the attack for Lervold, but again, not close enough.
Yep, and he does close in under braking here, down into 4, but not quite enough. So, yeah, it looks like he's going to have to try again a little bit later. Back to Arnie, who is now in 17th. Did he have further problems? Because I don't think he was this far down. Now he's working on Jack Stevenson. I'm checking to see, and I don't see another lap where it looks like he lost more. Let me double check.
Looked rather clean for the driver of the 242. Can we call this the classic comeback? Now looking on Stevenson for P16, and not too far off the road, Lisa Eskridge, who we saw have a problem in the sprint race. So far recovering well, very clean. Porsche Cayman GT4. I love the Powerpuff Girls scheme on this Hardo-Dixie region car in the number 12 after starting 18th. And is a couple of seconds off of Andy McCune, who's in another group of his own with Johan Nye, Robert Benson, and like we talked about, Stacy Iwata. Here comes Klassen, pass for 16th, complete.
And my memory just, rather my observation is not good enough, because I didn't realize that Arnie had dropped just that much in this race. He fell that far back. I didn't see any other issues out there. He's still climbing his way out of this hole. So up to 16th now, Lisa Eskridge. P15 for him is Stacy Iwata fighting with Jeremy Main. And Main's not going to fight this one. He's going to stay off to the outside, let that bright blue number 5 through.
How about it so far for Stacy Iwata, +5 after the start of the feature race. Canada West region driver really putting in the work now and just showing how much pace he's got. Jeremy Min now going to be under fire from Robert Benson, so we'll just have to see how things fare. And Benson, unfortunately, didn't crack the top 10 in the sprint race, and so far is remaining the same after our first 15 minutes or so, still in P12. And this is where you see again, Joe, what I mentioned, the clusters that build up after the first handful of laps at Interlagos with these cars and with this competition. 3 cars there, 2 cars here, 4 cars on another train, maybe 1 or 2 in the background. Just little groups of cars that if you end up in that situation, go for the passes and try to gain some points. But if you're all by yourself, then you just have to run your race. As here's Mark Duran, now closed in on your leader, 1.6 seconds to Duran.
Still consistently quicker. Yeah, he's closing it in, but it's not at a high rate of knots. It's going to be difficult for him to make that overtake once he gets up to him, if he does get up to him, I should say. Clayson, by the way, is up to 15th. Had a little bit of door-to-door contact with Lisa Eskridge when she had a mistake down into the Descida del Lago, but they both got away with it and kept going on without any sort of spin or incident. Last lap, just for comparison, between Scott and Mark. Scott with a 41.1, Mark with a 40.8. So there's another 0.3 chopped away as we come back to the battle for 8th.
And some really decent laps put up by Mark Duran, who on lap 7 put in his fastest lap of the feature at a 140.5. Durham, on the other hand, has kind of been hanging around 141s and hasn't really broken the 140.5 bracket at all. So maybe Duran's, like we said, letting that race catch up to him and now starting to reel in the race leader. Robert Benson here with, looks like Jeremy Maines. There's a car off, and that's Andy McCune in the Senna S, turn 1.
Had a coming together with Johan Nye, unfortunately. Got into the rear quarter panel of that car, and both lost multiple positions, but their loss is Arnie Clayson's gain. He is now up to 13th. So yeah, he is on an absolute tear now at this stage. The 242 car, I think, has gotten something like 4 positions in 2 or 3 laps.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of pace behind your points. And that's why he's the points leader. So quick each and every week, each and every race in this challenge class. Klassen is so good and very consistent. Despite the different types of tracks and different types of cars that we've seen. Finished 3rd at Spa just a couple of weeks back. And Klassen will really put himself in a really good spot here, Joe, because right now it's not looking all too great in 13th. But if you use strategy to your advantage, Klassen can undercut and possibly just overshoot everybody in front of him and may just end up with a top 5 or possibly a top 3 best case scenario if things go right. So Klassen has a lot on the upswing right now in the first 11 laps of this race.
And boy, that must have been an easy one for the stewards, because Andy McCune has a 20-second stop and hold penalty before he even completes a lap here. So quick decision from race control as we now watch Jack Stevenson versus Lisa Eskridge. And as she defends down to the inside, coming into the Senna S, is she going to just drift back over to the racing line? Yeah, and that's going to leave the door open. Jack is going to try and take it, but unfortunately, his eyes are bigger than his brakes.
Oh, way too much mustard in a turn 1. Going to slip through the grass. There's absolutely no grip there, Joe Peak. It becomes an ice rink when you get on the grass. Fortunately, didn't get back into any traffic that was around him, so good eye by Stevenson, and luckily no one else was there to make possibly what could have been a huge crash into turn 2. I think Art Schwartz, Andy McCune traded positions as McCune has headed for pit road. We did also see Art Schwartz, Joe, with an issue about a couple laps ago.
Yeah, he had a spin coming down through the Curva de Sol, and that's put him back in 18th. He's not been having the best of races back there, unfortunately. Ooh, Doran had a bad lap last lap, a 41.8. So he now lost all his hard work up to Durham. It's back up to 2.6 seconds. Scott's on a 40.7. He's responded and had his personal best and was about 3 to 4 tenths quicker than Mark Doran last time by. Interesting ebb and flow at the front here.
Yeah, it is an ebb and flow. It's also a situation, Joe, where Durham was maybe taking it a little easier those last couple of laps and knew he had the advantage of 2.6 seconds and said, okay, I don't need to push all that much. Let me hang back a little bit. As soon as Doran started catching up and Durham took notice, he's like, okay, now I got to tee up and I'll keep myself in check. So it's kind of funny to see how Durham and Doran are both keeping each other in check and how that checks and balances situation is Arne Klassen again goes for a pass, this time for 12th. And boy, that 242 on a mission and not stopping, not far ahead. Robert Benson for 11, so that 242 not quite done.
So that'll get him 12th place. Remember, the driver that he really wants to catch is Casey McDonald, but Casey is, let's see, about 30 seconds up the road currently. That's a pretty long distance. Seem to have had another issue for Lisa Eskridge here. And this is into Curva de Sol. Looks like the car is still rolling, and I don't see a whole lot of damage, but I think she did clout the wall.
And you see a lot of left side damage on Eskridge's machine. And indeed it was. From turn 1, got loose, clipped the grass, and then went hard into the outside guardrail. So a really tough situation there for Eskridge as we ride on board with Gallus, who's looking on forward to Tom Crane in 8th. Again, we talked about that sandwich that Crane might be in, trying to get around Lorville, but also trying to hold back on that 809. It looks like these three really haven't gained or lost all too much, Joe. They've just been all together and really close on pace as well. You're looking at 143s, 142s, and between both of them, at least high 142s, low 143s, so all of them in the same ballpark.
Yep, and that always makes it a bit frustrating when you're so close on pace. You need some consistency there to try and reel them in. So they cross once more, starting lap 13 now in this race. Big gain under braking for the number 809 of Robert, but it maybe was just a little bit too hot into the corner because all that time is given right back as they plunge down the hill. We're past the halfway point. I see Andy McCune has been in the pits, but I think that may have been to serve his stop and hold and not take service, because that was 21.5 seconds and he had that 20-second stop and hold. So I think he still needs to make a pit stop. That would mean that nobody has had service so far. P1 and P2 back down to 1.5 seconds. This time it was Scott Durham who had the poor lap at a 41.3.
So things are really starting to seesaw back and forth between these two leaders. And I want to know, Joe, just what they will do on pit road strategy, whether Durham is going to strike first or whether Duran is going to be the one to undercut here on that 4 and then try and hold on to the lead. And it gets really interesting to watch here at Interlagos, the pit road entry, because you see that white line that starts. You can run down there as a racing line to keep momentum and just have the shortest way around the racetrack to the start-finish line, but you really won't know when they come down pit road until they hit the brakes and they make that sharp left before about smacking the entrance of the pit road barrels. So I wonder if either first or second might go for it. It looks like Alex Lidback might be one of our first inside the top 5, the 11 car in for a stop.
And that was with Andrew Smiley catching him at a rate of knots. So I think this is definitely a call to try and manage that battle. Didn't want to be slowed down on track and said might as well pit in now. And don't see anybody else in behind him. Looks like he's the only, but he missed his pit stall. He had to back into it. So Alex, unfortunately, going to lose valuable seconds there.
And that's going to be tough. And with the stops here, it could really be detrimental. Fortunately, it looks like Lidback is able to get back out on track. Here's Robert Gallus, a big run through Rita Oposta. Can he dive on the brakes hard enough to get the spot? No, but that was enough to force Crane up the track. And here comes the 809 with this challenge for 7th. Finally,
side by side as they head towards the horseshoe on the outside. Robert, he's going to have to be very brave, and he is, as he tries to absolutely chuck it into the turn, but he just doesn't quite have the grip. He's on the outside as it continues on to the right down into SA, and Tom Crane will retain 7th place. But it's starting to get a little bit spicier now between these two.
And those two corners there, Ferradura and Laranjinha, Joe, are so tough to maneuver because they're pretty fast corners and they get into SA, which is a really slow right-hander. You have to make the most out of that momentum and keep it still there while you're turning at the same time. And for Tom Crane, Robert Gallus, it looks like that really did not change the outcome all too much, and Crane is going to hold on. And just being able to stay where he's at, hit that apex, be able to get a nice run into SA. So Gallus will have to try again. Maybe for turn 1, but at some point that patience is going to run thin, and at some point he'll probably turn over to pit road, being the savior. And so far we have had nobody else come in. Crane nor Gallus are taking a step down, and neither are your front runners at the top 5. So I think they're just starting to run the tank dry with about 15.5 minutes left.
Always the traditional strategy here in iRacing for 10 tops. Usually quicker to run the car dry, fill it up just what you need at the end, and sprint to the finish. We'll see if anybody tries anything alternate other than a lid back, and so far I'm not making out any more cars pitting in. They should be able to get to maybe about 12 minutes to go here in this race. So 1 or 2 more laps, and then that is the end of the stint. Lidback currently running in 13th, but he will get some of those positions back once everybody else pits.
And it's not going to be that big of a difference either. It's not like the undercut is more than 5 laps or so. It's really going to be 1, 2, or 3. As here comes Robert Gallus, an attack into the SA corner. Yes, Robert Gallus, the 809, up in his 7th. Tom Crane cannot respond, heading into Pinarino. And through the Bico de Pato, it looks like the 809, the polka-dotted Porsche Cayman GT4, has the spot.
The spot, was that intentional?
No. No pun intended.
The 809. Oh, but he's going to have to play defense, because look at Tom Crane. He's already trying to see if he can take that one back. A good exit out of the junction should do it if he can manage that, but no, it looks a little far behind. There's just not been enough slipstream that this is going to pull him in. So it looks like Robert has indeed sealed the deal on that one. Anybody going to try and dive in at this stage? And yes, it looks like Tom Crane will respond.
It looks like as soon as Gallus got that position, Crane knew it was his cue to come in. So the 864 heading in for the stop. Stacy Iwata will gain that spot and move up to 8th. So will Arnie Klassen, who will jump to 9th. And it looks like Robert Benson also is going to make a stop. So it looks like just 1, 2 cars maximum, Joe, for the trips down to pit road. And we continue to watch the battle between your leaders, and the gap has closed in a little more. 1.2, it was 1.1 seconds at some point. Duran is starting to reel in that 4. Is this a problem for Durham, and is he going to use pit road as that scapegoat?
Yeah, that's the big question mark in all of this. They're getting ready to end the lap here. It's either going to be this one or the next one, most likely, that they have to pit in. That car off track, that was Aubrey Iyer, who's not been having a good day. Had another incident early in the race and was set backwards. Andy McCune, though, is actually the last car racing currently, with only David Palmer having retired from this event, as neither of our top 2 will pit in this time by. They're both going to stay out. Not seeing any of the others as well pitting in. So pretty much everybody doing a pretty straightforward strategy.
Yeah, this is going to get rather interesting, because we're heading into the final. What's going to be 7 or so laps, so 12.5 minutes left in the feature. Are they going to hang it out to around 5 to 4 laps to go, or are they just going to try and strike now with the fact that they have enough time to cycle back? And where does Alex Lidback file out in all this? Because he's gained the spots up to 11th. Can he really jump cut the field and be able to find himself inside a top 5 or top 4, maybe top 3 position at the end of this deal? Seeing that the undercut has worked prior, so for Lidback, this might just be a saving grace for his race after he fell back from the first pack.
Lay, who we saw battling with Tom Crane, does not respond. He stays out. And not sure. Oh, is Nye maybe? Yes, Nye is going to be our latest taker in the 141. So he pits in. And I'm just kind of keeping an eye on that entry to see if anybody else is going to join them down on the lane. Usually you see some of those drivers a little farther back try and take those gambles of pitting earlier to see if they can use some sort of undercut to give themselves a spot. And Tom Crane is back in. He must have had some sort of speeding penalty. That is strange. No, it was no, maybe he just short fueled it.
Yeah.
Super short stop, and he's back on his way. Well, that is highly unusual, and if it is too little fuel, that was just a critical error right at the wrong time.
Yeah, too little, too late. Now it's going to be for him to gain those positions back. That is so tough there for Tom Crane. That was a 4.4 second stop. So yeah, Joe, it just must have been refueling and getting that extra splash that he had missed on the initial pit stop. That's tough for Crane, who was building such a great run up and probably was going to see a great battle between him and Robert Gallus near the end, just like they had right before Crane came in. And here's Mark Duron now within a second of Scott Durham. It's going to open back up, and it will head closer to the start-finish line. So things look at kind of interesting to see who comes in first. But I still expect Duron to probably undercut in this case. I don't see Durham going in first. But we'll see. Here's the entire track map, and with the pit strategy, Joe, here's how the entire field is stacked up. Everybody spread out.
Yeah, not many gaps out there, but honestly, it's not a huge field, so I don't think that's going to be much of an issue finding track space. Jack Stevenson now pits in the 116, so we should see him in and out. As looks like that leaves roughly about three-quarters of the field that still need to come and take fuel. Up at the front of them, Scott Durham still holding on to about 1.6 seconds. Whatever was plaguing him before, it looks like he's got it settled out now. The car is consistently looking decently quick in comparison to Mark, and it's been just hovering at that 1.6 second gap.
Here comes Duron.
So he is going to try and undercut him.
Yeah, I was expecting the 486 to come in, and also following suit is the 147 of Jonathan Reber, and then so will the 16 of Casey McDonald come in too. So Durham pretty much all by himself in that top 5 to not pit. Looks like Andrew Smiley is the last one in the 5th place position. And we'll watch and see whether that 167 will come in. Smiley will not, so now making 2 cars out of the top 5 to stay out. But Durham gonna overcut, everybody else gonna undercut, and here's where Lidback is in all of this. We'll see where he falls out.
Not sure that he's going to get any of them. Yeah, McDonald is just now leaving, and Lidback's heading up out of Water Tower. So looks like those who have pitted are done and gone. But Mark Dorn is actually fighting with Art Schwartz, who's a lap down, which is really bad news for him. He's going to be cost valuable time here. Now, this driver has a blue flag, but it is informational only. So as long as he is not trying to intentionally block and impede Mark Doran, he's okay, but it's still wrecking the 486's race.
And it's one of those deals where you have to find your way around the lap car. No ifs, ands, or buts. And the 46 is going to get really close going into the corner. That could have been some contact between the two. Doran ends up by, and Andrew Smiley is going to get trapped in this mix as well. Between that lap car, remember, Smiley has also not pitted along with Durham. So we're going to see that 167 car in, whether we see it now or see it a little bit later in this race. That's so tough there for Duron, losing him a lot of time. And here comes the 4. Your race leader is in.
I think this is going to work out beautifully for Scott, because Mark getting held up there, no doubt, lost at least a second, maybe more, having to wait and try to get around that slow-lapped car. As long as Scott has a decent pit stop, it was 9.7 stationary for Doran. Durham still taking fuel here as we wait for it to finish and be on his way. 8.8 seconds, it's even faster. And so Mark did not lose all that much time. He is coming down through the Senna S now. Scott is trying to exit out. This is not like I thought it was going to be. Maybe Mark was much quicker than we anticipated. And it's going to be a battle down into the Interlagos with a drag race to the corner. Little bit of extra speed from Mark on the racing line, and he is fully ahead as they hit the brakes. He's now your leader.
He's fully ahead, but he's not ahead by that much. Durham just got fresh off the pit stop. He's got a lot of speed, so that 4 car could strike at any moment with 6.5 minutes left. And boy, has this race turned into an absolute dogfight into La Ranjina, Ferradura, into the SA corner. Hard on the brakes, both of them will go. The 4 will close in. And a lot of time as well, Joe, for that 4 car of Durham to make a pass happen. 6.5 minutes right off the pit stop, and right within striking distance is perfect.
And the numbers do not lie. I was trying to figure out how in the world he lost that position. Well, it was cone to cone. While he was quicker in the box, 28.8 for Scott. Mark, 24 flat. So Scott did not attack his box as quickly as he maybe could have.
Yeah, that's true. It's a really, really big difference between those two. And we're talking about tenths of a second that could really mean the difference between a win and a loss. And now watch this. Lap car in front of them. Jeremy Main in his machine, number 7, might throw a wrench into this entire thing as they get closer, especially into a tight corner as Senna S turns 1 and 2. Durham is not there quite yet to make a pass on Duran. But maybe with the lap traffic trouble that we saw that 486 car in right before Durham came into pit road, we might see a challenge for the lead again as here comes Durham, a beautiful run at a turn 1.
He wants that position back. He's going to slice down to the inside. A little bit too late to defend. No, he somehow manages to get the car in front of him in time. Mark Doran covers off the inside as they come by lap traffic. Arnie Clayson tries to stay out, but the long way around. Scott Durham somehow gets it right back.
What a pass, but can Duran respond? And we saw Arnie Klassen at one point looking back into the top 5 or so, and now put a lap down. The 242 might just end up losing the championship points lead heading into event number 6. Nice run to the corner and dive deep on the brakes for Duran. He's not there quite yet, but he can give the bumper that 40 overshoots the corner.
Oh, did that end the battle right there? That may have put him a little too far behind. He's got a couple laps to try and make it back up, and we have seen him closing in earlier in the race. Can he rely on that pace at this stage, or did he use up a little bit too much before? They fly down towards the junction, still have that lapped car of Jeremy Main in front of them. He could also play a part of this. This is absolutely erupted after the pit stops.
Things have been absolutely phenomenal so far between these two, but watch the difference in the time they spent out on track and then the time that they're going to have to get to the end of this race. They pitted about a lap or 2 ago. That gives them maybe 3, 4, almost 5 laps until they get to the end of this race. You know who was better on the short run? That 4 of Scott Durham, but a huge dive in turn 1 by Durham in the 486. He gets close, and now the leader held up by the lap car, Jeremy Main. There's another one in sight. That appears to be Lisa Eskridge, so make it 4 cars that are in this grouping out of turn 2.
And only 2 of them are for the lead, though. Lisa, I think, saw what was happening. Yeah, she's going to lift and stay out of their way. But Jeremy Main is not going to leap out of the way. He's going to hold his racing line. Now he tries to slow on the exit of a corner. That was almost absolutely horrible. But everybody gets out of it okay without any car contact. And it did allow Doran to catch up somewhat.
And it definitely did. That's the worst place to catch a lap car at any place on any track with any car. If you're at the exit of a corner, you're going to lose so much ground when you catch up to that lap car at that time. It was a little more of a struggle than I anticipated for Durham here, but it, again, has reeled in that number 486, and Durham can still make this a 2-way fight for the race lead. And we're talking about 2 different sides of the story after the last race at Spa. Mark Durham had a really consistent race, but came home in 4th. Scott Durham, on the other hand, out of the Rocky Mountain region, went for the race win. So 2 of these in 2 different scenarios. Scott Durham loose out of the final corner, June Cow, and here comes Durham for the lead.
Oh, worked out perfect for the 486 car, but he's on the outside. It's the longer line. He loses some of that momentum. He is ahead. Surely he's got to defend the inside. And yes, he dives across to the left-hand side of the track, coming up into the Senna S, just floats it back to the racing line as they finally hit the brakes. 2 laps to go now, and we've now seen this lead change hands 3 times in 10 minutes.
We have, and it's been absolutely incredible. Now Durham has that opportunity to respond, but he's got little time left. It's going to be about the last lap once we get around to the start-finish line. So Durham really needs just one more last-ditch effort. And remember the point that I brought up before we started this feature race? Aggression being the key to stay in front of Mark Durham. He's going to need some of that magic now after the first lap to make it through to the final one and get the W.
Yeah, and Doran really wants that because I think he'll be the points leader if he manages to hold on to this position. Not sure what it'll do if he winds up in 2nd, but with a bad day for Arnie Clayson and Doran coming into this in 3rd, clearly he needs to try to make as much as he can out of this opportunity as they fly down to the Ducksbill once more. Diving through the banked right-hander, it looks like Durham is back on top of it once again. All he needs is a good run out of the junction here.
And remember, that's the same place where that 4 car had that issue and gave Mark Doran the lead. So there could be the same scenario happening again, although it's a nice last corner Junção by Scott Durham. And this is the most important factor, Joe. He's got the draft entering Subida de los Boxes and now heading for Senna S. Turn 1. He's got the back end of that GT4 in front of him. Another lap car as well, so that might throw a wrench in this thing as well. Final 35 seconds. White flag from Interlagos. Lap car lets him by. Durham hard on the brakes, looking for the lead.
Oh, just gives him a hello, but no real serious contact between them. Neither is spun by that, but definitely let him know, I am here. I want this spot back. The number 4, a little bit too far back down the Reta Posta. Don't think we're going to see a pass here into the Descida del Lago. He's got to maybe try and set him up for that last run coming down to the finish line, because it's going to be hard to try and make a pass here through the infield.
It looks like the next chance, Joe, if it's not the last corner Junção, it has to be Ferradura here entering La Ranjinha and the Esse. You can get a lot of momentum entering the braking zone. It looks like Durham doesn't even tap the brakes all that much. We'll get really close entering Esse. We'll dive harder than that 486, but just cannot quite get to the back bumper on either the left or the right side of that GT4. He stays in line, and you're right, Joe. It's going to come down to the very last corner unless Duran makes a mistake.
What's it going to be here? Pressure is on that 486. He has to be flawless out of that final turn. We saw how strong Scott was last time out. If he gets a good run, he could snipe him to the line. It's all who gets to that finish line first here, and it's looking pretty even between them. This could be it. Scott has a decent amount of slipstream, but will it be enough? Mark Doran trying to keep it as tight down to the inside to shorten that run as far as he can. It doesn't look like the 4 has it, and as Mark Doran reaches the finish line, he's going to take the win in the feature here in the challenge class. Incredible racing at the end. Just
stellar finish.
Unbelievable. It was such a slow build before the pit stops, Kenny, and then suddenly it just all came alive as we've got problems coming out of the final corner here.
It looks like a heap of cars all in this mix, and we talked about Alex Lidback, where he would end up. It looks like it may be P5 or P6, depending on whether this pass is complete. Lidback is there on Smiley. The drama still building up. That looks like Aubrey Iyer, the lap car there, 19th side-by-side at the line, and that will be the win for P5 for Andrew Smiley. Holds on as we'll look further back through the field, and Jack Stevenson also staying in front of a group of cars. But yeah, you're right. It really took a while to finally end up at that climax portion where we saw those two Titans going for the lead, and it might have started around where Doran was closing in on Durham quite a bit before those pit stops, and we started to see just a peep, just a little bit of what was to come. Unbelievable stuff. That was a lot of fun to watch.
The reason we're looking at Jack Stevenson is because he has gained 9 positions in this race, more than anybody else, and that's going to get him an 11th place finish. Only 13 on the lead lap, though, as that is the last of them across the line. That's going to take us to a short break. We'll come back with the unofficial results as well as driver interviews, so stick around. A little earlier if that's going to be the case. He's actually got a nose ahead as they come down into the braking zone. He's going to do it the hard way.
If you're a Porsche owner looking for reliable, convenient service without leaving the comfort of your home or office, look no further and take advantage of the Exchange at Home complimentary pickup and drop-off service exclusively at the Porsche Exchange in Highland Park. At the Porsche Exchange, it's all about creating a legendary ownership experience that embodies our guest lifestyle. Our Porsche service team utilizes cutting-edge technology that delivers a transparent service visit and keeps us in constant contact with our guests. And I can't think of anyone more qualified to work on your Porsche, new or classic, than our Porsche certified technicians. Whether you're a longtime guest or new to our dealership, I welcome you to experience legendary at the Porsche Exchange.
Welcome back to Interlagos for the last time, of course, before we head off to Hockenheim. And Mark Derwin was the one that took the win in both the sprint and the feature here in the challenge class. Same thing with Scott Durham, second place all around for him, as Jonathan Reber also third places in every race. Then it's Casey McDonald's, another one that gets all fours across the board to finish fourth here in the number 16. And then you start to get some variety. Andrew Smiley qualifying ninth initially in the evening and winding up with a fifth place by the feature race. Alex Lidback wound up in sixth. Randy Lervold qualified 11th initially and got P7 by the end. Robert Goulet was P8. And then Stacy Iwata, who had a bit of a really bad sprint race, bounced back and got ninth. Johan Nye rounds out your top 10 in the feature.
In P11 is the biggest mover of the feature race. Jack Stevenson started this one in 20th, ends up as 11th. Robert Benson will come home in 12th. Tom Crane will be 13th. We saw him make a second unscheduled pit stop to fill up on fuel, kind of ruined his race and put him back through the top 15. He's the last one on the lead lap. Arne Klassen had a tough strategy ending, came home in 14th, and will most notably lose the championship points lead after this one heading into Hockenheim. Chris Schuessler ends up 15th. It'll be 16th for the 7 of Jeremy Main. 17th will be Lisa Estridge in the number 12. Art Schwartz goes from 16th to 18th to end this race. Aubrey Iyer in the number 10 car goes from 21st to 19th. Andy McCune and David Palmer round out your top 21.
And for Mark Doran, well, it probably didn't quite go to plan there in the feature, but he still wound up with the win in the end. Mark, 2 seconds versus 0.2 of a second. At least you got the W.
Hey, they all count, right? An inch is as good as a mile at this game.
Absolutely. Now, talk about what happened at the start of the feature, though, because it seemed like the car just didn't go. What happened?
Yeah, good question. It seemed like the people either side of me and behind me indeed got the jump. I was trying to carefully manage the pace car speed, 50, and as soon as I saw the green lights, I put my foot in it. But clearly, everybody else did it faster. So from then, it was catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. And you had to fight hard for that. Talk about after the pit stops between you and Scott, because it seemed like you two were kind of even on things. And then suddenly it just all exploded.
Yeah, well, I did manage to get the drop on him coming out of the pit lane. As I came down the hill, I could see him making his way out. I'm like, oh, come on, hurry up, hurry up. And I was able to get my nose in front as we headed down to turn 4 there. So that was kind of good. I was feeling lucky about that because coming out of the pit, I got behind a car that was exiting much slower. So I thought, oh boy, I picked a bad time. But I don't know, maybe Scott had some of the same issues. Anyway, we got out, and then I'm ahead, and then we come up on a back marker, or 2 actually, and I frankly couldn't quite decide where to put myself to be safe. And Scott was just a bit more decisive, and took the lead again. But ultimately, I think I have to say a little bit of a thank you, because he made a bit of a mistake, I think, coming out of turn 12, had to back out of the power a little bit, and that was just enough to get me by. And with only a couple of laps left, all I've got to do is keep my nose down and do what it takes to stay in front.
Well, speaking of keeping your nose down, I believe, and I'm not sure what the actual math is, but there's a good chance that you're now the points leader from that performance with a perfect score. So best of luck as you head off to Hockenheim. This has been great timing for you.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, I got to do a quick shout out to my wife here. She's very patient with me doing all of this, and she was sitting, we were sitting together last night discussing the upcoming race, and she said to me, "So, what creative way are you going to find to scotch your race this week?" And so we talked through a few of those things happily. Maybe that put the luck on my side a little bit. So I got to thank her a lot.
Exactly. Bit of a break a leg there, sort of wishing.
Yeah, exactly.
That was Mark Doran, our winner here in both the sprint and the feature. Seconds all around for Scott Durham, though, and Kenny has caught up with him.
Yeah, twos all across the board for this number 4 car of Scott Durham. And Scott, I want to talk about the end of that race in the feature. You came out of pit road. You were right there even with Mark Doran. What was going through your mind, and give us your perspective through all that?
Well, I overshot my pit, so that's mostly what was on my mind as I was coming out, and we were even. So, but like I said earlier, I did get around him a little bit later, and I just wasn't able to hold him off. Mark was just faster today, and I kind of made a mistake coming up the hill there on the second to the last lap. It missed a shift, which I'm not sure how you do that with a paddle shifter, but I did it, and kind of staggered me a little bit. I think I might have been able to hold him off. I had kept him behind me then, but obviously he swept everything, so he certainly earned it.
And take us through that last lap where you had given up the spot. You were there in second. You were charging on the 486 right in front of you. Did you feel that there was anything that you probably could have done differently to get a little bit closer to Doran and make it side by side to the line?
Not really, because I just didn't have enough. I was never getting that last corner very well up the hill. I was getting an average at times, but sometimes I was messing it up. It really messed me up, obviously, by overshooting my pit because I had to back up. And it just took me probably another 4 or 5 seconds in the pits, and that was just an error on my part. So you make mistakes, especially somebody like Mark, who was just clicking laps. He was very, very, very consistent. I wasn't able to really get down to the lap times that I was doing in practice consistently enough. That definitely made a difference, but he was reeling me in from the beginning. I got a little bit better start. I think there was a little side by side for those guys at the start, which slowed him down and let me get away. But after that, he was matching me and getting me a little on pace, and then my mistake in the pits kind of cost me for sure.
Well, nonetheless, second place finish here from Interlagos to close off PCA here from this track and the Challenge Series. And got to talk about point standings. You didn't make Road America or VIR, but you came home in Suzuka and Spa. Had a first place at Spa a couple of weeks back, second place tonight. It looks like things are really on the track for you to kind of make a statement inside the point standings, no?
I'd like to. I'll make Hockenheim, but I don't know that I'm going to make anything after that because I've got some work, and then we're family stuff. We're going to Ireland and that. So unfortunately, I'm going to, kind of be a part-timer for this season. Hopefully next year I'll be able to make them all in that because it's been a heck of a lot of fun. I do make a lot of the arriving drives, but I think I'll make Hockenheim, which I've never driven, but I don't know that I'm going to make the ones after that. We'll see.
Well, it's all good. No matter when we see you out on the track, it's sure to be a lot of fun when we see you out there. Scott, big congratulations on the second place here from Interlagos, and looking forward to seeing you at Hockenheim in a couple of weeks.
Thanks. Really appreciate your guys' coverage.
That's Scott Durham in the 4 car. So fast, unfortunately short of the race win, but still a lot of great stuff from him. And we'll turn to P3. Really calm ending for third place car, Jonathan Reber in the 147. Joe, you've got him.
Indeed, but not a calm start. So let's talk about that feature here, John. You held the lead for about 10 feet, but
yeah, that was an exciting 10 feet. That was a great 10 feet. Really 10 feet.
But what about going into turn 1, especially considering what happened last night with the sport class? Were you worried about something going wrong?
I was a little bit, but I basically tried going down the inside in the heat race, and it seemed to work. So I just was thinking, what the hell? Let's give it another shot, see if we can get it working again. And then had a slightly panicky lap 1 right next to Mark, pretty much the entire length of the lap, which was I'm pleased that didn't end in tears for anyone. So that was good, but it was a good fun. It was a good first lap, good fun first lap.
Now, your consistency has definitely helped you in this case. All third places is going to be good points, but unfortunately for you, Mark Doran got all first places, so he might actually have the points lead over you here. I'm not entirely sure. So what do you do from here to try and take the fight back to him?
That's a good question. I mean, Hockenheim, I haven't done before at all, so that's completely new to me. Mid-Ohio, I think we've got next. I've done that one before. Sebring, I've done quite a bit. We did that in the Zone Group Championship and so on as well. So there's various pieces on that. So I'm just going to try what I've been doing so far, to be honest. I haven't won a race yet. I'm just trying to be consistent, trying to stay out of trouble. And that's worked to get me where I am so far. I'm just going to keep trying it and hope for the best, I think.
Well, that's understandable. You listed off some of the tracks, but let's not forget it's different cars as well. And I am being told it's actually Watkins Glen, not Mid-Ohio.
Oh, sorry, Watkins Glen.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
well, I get my magic livery that gets me 2.3 of a seconds a lap next time because we're back in the GT3R, I think. So there we go. That'll probably get me ahead of Mark, I'm sure.
All right. I like that theory, honestly. Well, best of luck when we hit the GT3s. Anybody you want to thank before we let you go?
I'm just going to again thank the UCR group who are so supportive. You know, my sort of home team, as it were, who used to help us and give advice and so on whenever we're trying. Some of us in the lower groups are trying new tracks. So thanks very much to them and to all of our sponsors again for letting us do these races and have these broadcasts and everything else. It's I'm very grateful to the Moto Porsche Exchange. So thank you very much.
That was Jonathan Reber, third place, and it may have looked straightforward on paper with the finishing order for both the races, but I can assure you it was not. As we're going to close out, make sure and join us here on Wednesday, May 24th at 9:25 p.m. Eastern for the club sport class at Hockenheim. Also, we'd like to thank our sponsors for Series 10. The Porsche Exchange, Six Sigma Sim Racing, and a big thank you to the steering committee at PCA Sim Racing, and a huge thanks to our team tonight, Kenneth, Ryan, Cameron, and Dougie. Also, none of this is possible without those behind the scenes at Podent Esports, Ryan Bauer, Gary Sexton, and John Theodore. Thank you so much for watching tonight's broadcast of PCA Sim Racing. I'm Joe Pete, and I'll see you on the track.